What's going on, YouTube, and welcome on in. I'm sorry for the lack of updates, lack of videos that have been out recently. I've been out of town, super busy, getting married. I'm a married man now, but I'm back and I'm ready to continue making content for y'all. So stay tuned for that. In this video though, I want to go over two things. One, a tier list where I organized all the knights, and these are going to focus, guys, on mitigation knights. So you won't see units on there like Fire Charlotte, who's primarily a damage dealer. These are for knights that are supposed to protect your squad, provide some sort of mitigation, either in the form of utility, damage reduction, that are used in the more standard-ish style of play for primarily real-time arena, and then also a little bit for World Championship format. Guild Wars and Arena are a separate situation. Units like Yulha and Fighter Maya can shine there big time, whereas this is more for real-time arena where your units need to be handpicked for a certain situation, and a lot of knights recently have gotten shifted around. The young man at the table sitting there, in particular, his meteoric rise to the top, I want to focus on. So first we'll cover all the knights that I think we want to look at in the tier list, and then I'll focus on ARas, why you need to build them, as well as some example builds and things like that. So stay tuned, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let's get on with the video. Alright, y'all, without further ado, let me go and pull up the tier list, and I want to do a quick shout out. Super fast, boys. I actually did a tier list with Valky as per usual for the end of this season, RTA season, leading into the next one, and this is going to cover the entire cast. It is up to date, so please, I'm going to hopefully put up a link up there that you can click, as well as check in the description and the pinned comment, and we'll show the thumbnail. Guys, if y'all can do me a huge favor, check that video out. Not only are you going to get to see mine and Valk's thoughts on the overall season tier list, that's going to include all the characters, not just knights, but you also helped me out a ton by giving that video a view, okay? So make sure after you watch this or before, check out the entire tier list for all the cast, not just the knights. Okay, boys, let's go ahead and move quickly through this tier list. It's going to be very fast. Let's start at the bottom and end with ARas, as I have more info to give to y'all about him. But let's go and start at the bottom and move our way up. Remember, these are mitigation knights, and I'm a player that I would say 95% of my drafts, I always try to maintain having a knight because I'm a slower player and I need them to help protect my team so that I can, you know, survive and then answer back, attack back. So let's go ahead and lead and start with Eaton. Eaton has an insane amount of damage mitigation, 30% damage share, and on top of that, it's in the form of his passive, and so he doesn't need to run Aureus. That means you can stack another damage artifact on top of that, like Adamant Shield or Bastion of Perlucia. However, he is ranked the lowest here because he is a greedy unit. So even though he provides some massive mitigation, beyond that, he's literally just sitting there and really not providing too much. Not a very strong skill 1. Then the barrier for himself is just very greedy. So besides the passive mitigation through his S2 passive and artifact, you really don't want to be bringing him unless you have nothing else. In some rare scenarios, guys, and especially if you're lacking some of these other knights, I think if you do have an Eaton, he's a low cost investment unit. You can pick him up since he is a 3-star. They'll be very cheap to build. Next up, guys, we have Last Rider Crowl. This is an interesting one. Depending on how much you like him or use him, if you use him in other roles, we can probably place him up, or you know, he can go farther up depending on how you use him. But if we just want to slap Aureus on him and have him as a tank, the reason he places so low is because he's a lot more niche. We want to make sure we're bringing him against AoE, and right now we would just prefer to have other higher damage reduction knights, and the damage from his S3 is, although nice, a lot of people don't like playing that slower grind down style. You really need your opponent to pick certain things for him. He's a more reactive sort of knight instead of a more proactive one that is just straight out of the box powerful. So although he used to be absolutely insane, he's still very viable in this meta, and there are some situations, like if your opponent is picking Seaside Bologna or other AoE units, you do want to pick him up here. The fact that he provides immunity up and can hold a damage reduction artifact means he's still going to be solid regardless. Now, next up, we have Crimson Armin, guys. Speaking of units that have fallen off big time, Crimson Armin post-buff was actually one of the premier knights. Possibly could have been placed S rank if I was to do a tier list back then, was 1 or 2 seasons ago. But recently, with a rise of how much unbuffable debuffs, she just struggles with the lack of cleanse. And on top of that, guys, her 15% passive damage mitigation oftentimes nowadays gets we lose the value from it because other units like Archdemon's Shadow, we got Little Queen Charlotte, you have units like Hua Young now, all have built-in damage reduction as well. That's going to be higher than Crimson Armin, so it's going to outscale that. On top of that, you have artifacts like Draco Plate. It's just become a lot less effective for her to have that damage reduction. And then, of course, the weakness with all the unbuffable flying around, all the strips flying around, has made Crimson Armin very hard to run. If you can somehow lock in a comp where she doesn't have to fight those. The skill 3 can oftentimes stall long enough or just straight up win you matches, and she still has insane mitigation. It's just hard to run her at the moment, so be very careful running this unit. Green Armin is an interesting one, guys. I put her in B only if we're going to use her as a mitigation knight, which she can be used for. With her EE, she has a lot of versatility. You can actually run double cleanse, or two debuff cleanse for the skill 3, and on top of that, she has the single target mitigation on skill 2. However, even with the counters, if we don't build her on a damage build, I don't think she justifies a spot as a mitigation knight. Now, that being said, if we were to run her as an AntiCleave knight, put her on Elbrus, maybe even counter set to double dip on her built-in counter, build her full damage, I think that becomes a much better role, but I don't know if I would consider her in this tier list because that is a different style. She will still provide mitigation through her single target, as long, just remember guys, it doesn't affect her herself. But in terms of AntiCleave, she can work as a secondary knight in case they ban your primary knight. Let's say they ban your primary knight, she'll still provide some single target mitigation, which can definitely save your butt. But if we were to just use her in a classic role, non-damage, non-AoE, anti-AoE, I think she's not a very good pick. Next up, guys, we have Falconer Cleary, who's kind of like Last Rider Crow. There's going to be, she does, I think the current build, a lot of players, if you are going to run Flurry, you do want to run her on Aureus for that extra mitigation. You really just don't need any other artifact on her right now. I know some people like to play other builds, but if you were to see her in competitive play, I think right now Aureus is still very, very strong because it stacks with all the other mitigation, and it'll provide some extra team defensive utility. On top of that, Cleary is another niche one where if you like to play that aggressive style, if you can capitalize off either the full defense break or the strip, then Flurry is going to be absolutely amazing. However, if you just want a straight mitigation knight out of the box that's just going to protect your team, there are way better choices. Depending on the player, this is probably the most polarizing one in terms of how you want to use her. She can be moved around, but we'll place her here for now. Next up, guys, we have Crow, who is kind of coming back a little bit here and there. Against units like Lionheart Sirmia, Crow is an absolute beast. The reason he was kind of losing value, losing stock, losing favor is because of units like Apocalypse Ravi, who single-handedly just nullify his skill 3 because of injury, meaning he doesn't get to do that big damage nuke. If you can avoid the Apocalypse Ravis and bring him in a massive AoE like Lionheart Sirmia, she is super popular right now. Crow is going to both provide defense up, Aureus, random provokes, as well as that huge skill 3, usually one-shotting a DPS of your choice. So a very, very strong pick in the right hands. Shadow Knight Pillis is actually lost a little bit of value. Previous seasons, I know I made a video about how good she was when Conquer Lilies first came out. Shadow Knight Pillis was such a good answer. She didn't lose anything. She didn't get nerfed at all, but there are other knights I think that are more powerful at the moment. However, her strength still lies if your opponent does have dual attacks, counterattacks, whatever it might be. Conquer Lilies, still a very strong pick. Her plus Lionheart Sirmia fighting Conquer Lilies is always, it's a match made in heaven. And the added benefit is her cleanse, right? She cleanses 1 debuff, is actually very, very nice, and is a reason why you might want to run her over someone who is technically better, like Roz. So if you're worried about debuffs, guys, that 1 cleanse can actually save you big time, so don't neglect that at all. For everything else besides anti-counters, if they don't bring dual attacks counters to the table, don't run Pillis if you don't need the debuff cleanse. All right, guys, now we're finally at the top row. We have Troublemaker Crow, who is just absolutely insane. He is the premier anti-cleave knight. The only time we don't want to be running him is in a standard match where the pace is much slower, but if your opponent is aggressive, especially if they're full cleaving, Troublemaker Crow is your guy. Not only does he have annoying built-in counters that can stun, but he has a skill 3 just a utility kit of CR push, cleansing, plus depending on who he's protecting, buffs like anti-crit, whatever it might be. He's just absolutely busted when you fight units like that. You need one built up, guys. If you are a slower player, if you don't plan to always be first or be cleaving, you're going to want a Troublemaker Crow in your arsenal 100%. Start investing in him sooner than later. Next up, guys, we have Fallen Cecilia. I don't have to spend too long on this. She's been one of the most powerful units, never changing since she's come out, but recently with the introduction of DJ Bazaar, and then we already had Operator Cigarette, she is losing some value as barriers are also going to be getting weaker with the new frenzy changes for RTA. Keep that in mind, guys. Frenzy will be affecting barriers, so units like Fallen Cecilia is going to lose some value from that. And then, of course, the new DJ Bazaar and then Operator Cigarette was always a worry. If you can kind of just avoid all that, She is still one of the best, second best knight in the game in my opinion. By far, provides the most mitigation. You just gotta worry now about getting trapped, because smart opponents will trap you if you pick FCC too early. Other than that, nothing else needs to be said. One of the best, still one of the best viable pickups. Last but not least, guys, now we got Ras, and let's go ahead and open up the page real fast, and I can show you my Ras here sitting at the table. This guy, boys, he used to be middle of the pack, but after his recent buffs, and let's go ahead and go into the tree, and I'll show you what made him so good. Okay, let me go ahead and open up the skill tree and show you why he became so good right now, especially for this current aggressive meta. It's this Solitude rune, boys. Let me go ahead and read it, because there are some stipulations, some details some of y'all that aren't running Ras may overlook, but few things to note. Number one, has to be a single attack, and it has to be 30% or more of the target max health. After that, you get a barrier for 2 turns, and the barrier is 40%, which is massive, guys. This is absolutely insane, and it's gonna keep note of that when you see my build. And also, last but not least, can only be activated once per battle, so it only happens once. It has to only be a single attack, so no AOE, and it has to be 30% of more of the unit that's getting hit their max health. Okay, so with all that considered, why is that so good? Because, guys, Ras got a built-in reactive super fat barrier, where if you are a standard player, especially like me, a slower player, where all you have to do is survive, and then you answer back and kill those aggressive squishies, this is a godsend in helping your hyper carries. Let's say, for example, Lionheart Sirmia, Archimon Mercedes, or Archimon's Shadow, Seaside Bellona, even sometimes Landy, whatever it might be, that squishy in the back row that might be getting hit. I say sometimes Landy because if she's not in stealth, you might be in trouble. But overall, you get the point. You can even put Apocalypse Ravi's back there if you really want to be annoying. You just put a damage unit or something important back there that you want to protect, and once per battle, you get a 40% barrier, which, by the way, guys, if you haven't seen how fat the barrier is, hopefully I got some clips. It is absolutely amazing, and it is super strong. So, with that being said, that's really the only change he got. They moved around some runes to make, to fit that, but overall, he's functionally the same besides the super fat reactive barrier that'll happen if your opponent is targeting your backline unit. Now, that kind of ties into the build here, guys. I try to stack as much health as possible. Ras is a knight, and depending on your playstyle, you can vary a lot. Don't worry too much about specific stats. For 2-piece sets, you can almost do whatever you want. I prefer speed. I think speed is just the best overall because he is a knight. He doesn't need anything else, and it gives a lot of free stats. Now, in terms of the actual gearing, besides, remember, boys, we want to focus a lot of health to increase that barrier size. Make sure the defense isn't low because he is our primary knight. And a lot of times what I've noticed nowadays is instead of hitting the back row unit, because it stalls them out so long, boys, the barrier is so big, it'll protect your DPS so long, a lot of players will now instead try to just kill Ras first. They'll just get him out of the way first, and so you're gonna want to make sure he has some defense on top of just having high health. In terms of the speed, anything works, just don't make him too slow. A lot of people like faster Rases, so you can get an earlier defense up. However, with how fast and aggressive your opponents are more likely to be, I don't think this matters as much as it used to, where people would run a super fast Ras to get a fast defense up and cycle his turns really quick. Instead, I prefer to get more health, but, just get the speed to your taste, however you want it. Try to avoid all crit chance, crit damage, obviously, guys. Don't waste any stats like me. And then here's the next part where y'all can adjust your Ras to how you want it. I prefer effect resist because I'm a slower player. I want to make sure he's not getting taunted and stuff like that before I can get my skill 2 immunity up for both Ras and the DPS. And yeah, I just don't want him getting debuffed to the lower effectiveness units. A lot of players, though, will opt for effectiveness instead, and so that he can land his big defense breaks from the skill 2. It comes from Maroon, guys. You can land a defense break having higher effectiveness onto some basic lower ER units. So whatever you want, just make sure he has a ton of health. Don't neglect the defense. Get a little bit of speed, up to how much you want. And then last but not least, choose either effectiveness, more offensive, defense breaks, or defensive, effect resist. Make sure he's just solid, not getting any annoying taunts onto him, things like that. All right, with that being said, boys, we'll wrap it up here. All I can say is, please, if you're planning to play some competitive PvP soon, build up Ras. I know some of y'all may not like him, but look at this expression, man, with a fiery sword. He's the main character for a reason. He's so good now. You all have him, so cheap to invest into. Build him up. He's the king knight, even better than the queen, Fallen Cecilia. And with that being said, we'll wrap it up there. Let me know what you guys think about all these knights, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out, everybody.